The first thing I did after reincarnating as Godzilla was to submit myself to the nation, initiating a 1.4 billion people-wide title, guiding me to no 1 month later. Planet Earth would suffer an alien invasion, at which point the hot weapons that humanity prides itself on would all become ineffective. In just one night, over half of the global population would perish. Now, not only have I been reborn a month before the giant beast attack, but I've also become a juvenile Godzilla with a height of 100 meters. At this moment, I am located in the 10,000-meter deep-sea area in the central Pacific Ocean. After a brief moment of confusion, I recognized the reality. In the previous life, during the confrontation with the aliens, I was seriously injured and instantly crushed into minced meat. Human bodies are like ants in front of aliens. Now, reborn as Godzilla, I am the only one on Earth who can go head-to-head with the aliens. To save humanity, I must grow up as soon as possible before the alien invasion. Anyone familiar with Godzilla knows that an adult Godzilla eats hundreds of Ultraman for each meal. Ordinary families simply cannot afford to raise one. The only way out is to rely on the country, in exchange for logistical support and firepower assistance from the entire nation. But I am very clear that the sudden appearance of an unknown giant beast, 100 meters tall, on the coastline will definitely not be greeted with flowers and applause, but with overwhelming anti-ship missiles and nuclear strikes. I must prove my value, prove that I am controllable, and possess intelligence that humans cannot resist. I didn't rush to swim to the surface of the sea, but focused my gaze on a thick cable spanning the bottom of the ocean. It was a civilian submarine optical cable. I cautiously extended the tip of my palm and gently placed it on the insulating jacket of the cable. I did not cut it off. Instead, I used Godzilla's special bioelectromagnetic field to tentatively connect my mental power to its signal frequency band. The massive and complex flow of information instantly impacted my brain. I quickly filtered out useless entertainment news and commercial data, accurately capturing key information. Confirmed the current timeline and the national defense situation of Dragon Country. Everything is still in time. Now it's time to say hello. I placed my claws on the seabed rock layer next to the cable. The huge tail suddenly raised, and then with a seemingly clumsy but extremely precise rhythm, it heavily struck the seabed. The huge kinetic energy was converted into low-frequency seismic waves, following the Earth's crust and seawater, transmitting at speeds far exceeding the speed of sound towards the Dragon Country coastline thousands of kilometers away. This is not meaningless destruction. This is standard Morse code. I tapped 3 times in a row, sending the same message: no malice. Have world-ending intelligence. Report. After sending the signal, I didn't wait in place. I don't know if the military can immediately decipher this low-frequency seismic wave code with a strong science fiction flavor. But I must act. My legs suddenly exerted force, changing direction. I sprinted at full speed towards the coastline of the Dragon Country's East Sea. After a full 4 hours of high-intensity underwater swimming, the color of the water in front finally began to lighten. The outline of the continental shelf vaguely emerged in the dark sea water. I swung my tail fiercely. The huge body forcibly braked in the sea water. The huge inertia stirred up a violent wave, turning the sediment on the seabed upside down. I stopped. Without crossing the boundary by even half a point, I precisely stopped my 100-meter-tall body in the high seas area outside the Dragon Country's East Sea coastline. At this time, I could clearly feel that hundreds of meters above my head, the sea surface was already covered with dense electromagnetic signals. Countless radar waves were tightly locking onto the area where I was. I knew that as long as I took even 1 more meter forward, what would greet me would definitely be saturated depth charges and anti-submarine torpedoes. I extended most of my body out of the sea, without making any demonstrative roars, nor waving my claws. I just stood quietly on the sea surface, like a silent, huge island. I raised my head and calmly looked at the distant coastline. That is the Dragon Country's coastal radar station. I took a deep breath. The rib-like fins on my back lit up again with a dazzling, ghostly blue light. This scene instantly alerted the headquarters hall thousands of miles away. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. High-energy reaction. The target's body is gathering extremely large, unknown energy, suspected of preparing to launch an attack. The radar operator's voice changed due to extreme tension. I didn't attack. I just spewed an atomic breath from my mouth. Like a high-powered plasma welding torch, it precisely swept across the sea in front, forcefully burning a line of huge, brightly lit Dragon Country Chinese characters on the sea. Lingyan. Surrender. Have world-ending crisis. Report. Absolutely no destruction. Water vapor lingered for a long time under the agitation of high temperature. The line of characters was so clear in the sunlight that it felt absurd. Almost at the same time, in the underground command hall of the Dragon Country's National Defense Headquarters, the piercing top-level red alert instantly tore apart all tranquility. In front of the huge holographic projection combat screen, Hundreds of staff and technicians were frantically tapping on keyboards. Countless data cascaded down like a waterfall. The entire hall was illuminated by the glaring red alert lights, like a scene from hell. The East Sea Air Defense Identification Zone fully activated air surveillance radar. Target locked. Sonar soldier, reporting with a trembling voice. Target's underwater displacement is estimated to exceed 100,000 tons, releasing continuous low-frequency gravitational wave interference. Conventional submarines cannot approach. Sea-based Dongfeng series anti-ship missiles entering the final 30-second countdown to ignition. Please advise. A tense and oppressive atmosphere filled everyone's chests. Lin Jianjun, the commander of the war zone, strode into the hall. That angular face, etched with wind and frost, was now so solemn that it seemed as if water could drip from it. Situation report. Lin Jianjun strode to the main console, his voice as steady as a mountain. That iron discipline, honed from a sea of corpses and blood, instantly suppressed most of the panic in the hall. Chief, 5 minutes ago, a high-energy reaction occurred in the high seas area of the East Sea. Military satellites captured it. The intelligence officer swallowed a mouthful of saliva, his fingers calling up the image on the console. His voice carried an undisguisable sense of absurdity and shock. Captured an unknown creature 100 meters tall. The main screen flickered. The gazes of the staff and generals did not stay on the monster itself. Everyone was staring at the sea in front of the giant beast. That area of the sea was boiling. In the thick white mist evaporated by the high temperature, a line of huge Chinese characters written in pure square characters was slowly twisting with the undulation of the waves. Lingyan, surrender. Have world-ending crisis. Report. Absolutely no destruction. Lin Jianjun's eyebrows shot up, his sharp gaze instantly slicing towards the intelligence officer like a knife. A holographic projection prank? Or some kind of new optical deception weapon from an enemy country? Not a projection, the technical director suddenly stood up. The tactical tablet in his hand was almost crushed by him. Infrared thermal imaging shows that those words were burned out by extremely high temperatures. The local sea surface temperature broke 3,000 degrees in that instant, Commander. This monster just spat out a beam of high-energy plasma from its mouth. Like a laser engraving machine, it forcibly carved these words on the sea. The technical director wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. His voice was tight. This requires absolutely freakish levels of energy control. If it had widened the beam just now, even if it had just swept across our coastline, the coastal defense positions in Donghai City would have all evaporated by now. The command hall fell into dead silence. A prehistoric behemoth weighing 100,000 tons, writing Chinese characters at the entrance of the East China Sea, at the same time. Above the East China Sea coastline, 2 stealth fighters tore through the clouds like sharp arrows, entering a circling alert state at an altitude of 10,000 meters. Falcon 1 calling command center has arrived above the target sea area, visually confirmed target. Pilot Zhang Rui gripped the control stick tightly. His heart was beating wildly at a rate of 140 beats per minute. Overlooking from high altitude, ready to fire at any time. Zhang Rui's finger hovered over the missile launch button. As soon as an order is given, the heavy air-to-sea missiles under the wings will instantly roar out. Let this monster taste the fiery wrath of modern industry. But he waited and waited, but no order to fire came. Just then, the behemoth on the sea moved. Zhang Rui's pupils shrank sharply. He yanked the control stick, preparing to evade a possible anti-aircraft counterattack. But contrary to everyone's expectations, the monster did not raise its head and roar, nor did it open its abyss-like jaws. It just slowly raised its 2 thick and powerful forelimbs, crossed its black-textured hands, with an extremely steady, slow, even slightly restrained movement and put them behind its head. Then, its massive body slowly sank. Until the cold seawater submerged its waist, it sat there, coiling its thick tail, completely at the edge of the offshore continental shelf. This is a standard, head-holding squat defense posture belonging to human prisoners of war. Zhang Rui was dumbfounded in the cockpit. His tongue was even a little tied, and his knuckles were slightly white from exertion. He had fought for half his life. He had seen all sorts of battles, but the scene before him completely shattered his strategic understanding. Quickly, please invite Academician Chen over. Lin Jianjun took a deep breath and issued the order. 3 minutes later, Academician Chen Jinshan, a double-degree titan in bioengineering and nuclear physics in the war zone, in his 70s wearing a faded old white coat, was almost dragged into the hall by 2 fully armed guards. Old Lin. You dragged me out of the lab in such a hurry, it better be something huge. Chen Jinshan hadn't finished speaking, when his eyes were glued to the main screen. In those eyes, originally clouded from staying up late, an unprecedented fanatical light suddenly burst out, as if he had seen the most perfect work of art in the world. Academician Chen, look at its energy reaction. Lin Jianjun took the initiative to give way to the main console. Chun Jinshan had no time to pay attention to him, and directly pounced in front of the console. His fingers tapped quickly on the keyboard, quickly calling up the Lin also just released the energy waveform diagram and thermodynamic distribution data of the miniaturized atomic breath. Looking at the dense data, Chun Jinshan's breathing became more and more rapid, his chest rose and fell violently, and finally, he even lay on the screen. His fingers trembled as he pressed the smooth waveform curve. Perfect, too perfect. Chun Jinshan muttered to himself, his voice loud enough for the entire command hall to hear. The nuclear fusion reaction in its body. There is no leakage of radioactive nuclear waste. The radiation value displayed by the Geiger counter around him is even lower than the background radiation in the center of our Donghai city. This is simply an absolutely perfect, living cold fusion reactor. Chun Jinshan suddenly turned his head, pointing to a piece of data on the screen and looking at Lin Jianjun like a fanatical believer. Old Lin. Look at this energy output waveform. When it spit out that 3000-degree high-temperature beam, the temperature increase of the surrounding seawater was less than 2 degrees. This means that it has absolutely compressed all the energy inside the beam, without a trace of overflow loss. The hall was so quiet that a pin could be heard dropping. This is not beast instinct. Chun Jinshan's face suddenly became extremely serious. He said, word by word, this is a higher level of physical control than we humans have. To put it bluntly, the consciousness within this monster's body has a better understanding of nuclear energy than our current entire Dragon Country Academy of Sciences system. On the sea, I maintain the posture of holding my head, calmly watching the stealth fighters circling in the sky. I know very well that a Chinese character and a head-holding action are simply not enough. It is not enough for the Dragon Country's top leaders to completely let go of their guard. The operation of the state machine allows no blind gambling, facing an unknown behemoth capable of destroying cities. The military's first reaction is always to be on guard. The 30-day countdown is too tight. I must get the Dragon Country's endorsement as quickly as possible. I must throw out a heavy bargaining chip that Dragon Country cannot refuse, and cannot even afford to lose. I put down my hands crossed behind my head, took a deep breath, a large amount of air poured into my huge lungs, and my chest rose high. The fighters circling in the sky instantly scattered. The lock-on warning sound of the fire control radar echoed madly in my mind. But I didn't care. The dorsal fins lit up with a ghostly blue light again, one after another from bottom to top. The sizzling sound of the heated seawater rang out again. Here it comes. It's charging. In the command hall, a technician warned sharply. Lin Jianjun stared intently at the screen. Veins popped on his forehead. He gritted his teeth and roared, "Maintain restraint. No one is allowed to open fire without my order." On the sea, I opened my mouth again. This time, the plasma beam was thinner than before and controlled more precisely. The high-temperature beam swept across the sea surface, causing the water to boil violently. After a few seconds, the white steam dissipated, revealing densely packed paragraphs of news on the sea surface. First, tonight at 2:04 a.m., in the Mariana Trench of the Pacific Ocean, at coordinates 11 degrees 21 minutes north, 142 degrees 12 minutes east, a spatial tear will occur. The first Sentinel-class alien mech will land on Earth. Second, its weak point is on its abdomen, in the gap of the third fake sheath. Conventional artillery is ineffective. Armor-piercing rounds must be used in conjunction with high-frequency sonic vibrations for pinpoint demolition. Third, my weak point is in the hidden folds on both sides of my neck. There is no armor covering this area, and it directly connects to the nerve center. A conventional heavy armor piercing. With these 3 paragraphs, I turned around voluntarily. My massive body faced away from the Dragon Country's coastline. I raised my head, exposing my thick neck completely to the air. Then, controlling my muscles, I voluntarily flipped open the giant defensive scales on both sides of my neck, revealing the soft, dark red folds inside, unprotected by any armor. The sea breeze directly blew on the nerve endings, bringing a stinging sensation. I didn't move. I just exposed my most fatal weakness. Completely. I just exposed my most fatal weakness. Completely. This is absolute sincerity, and a life-and-death commitment without reservation. The entire Eastern Theater Command Hall was as silent as if it were in the vacuum of absolute zero. Everyone was stunned by these paragraphs, their scalps tingling, their breathing stopping. Predicting an alien invasion in 12 hours, giving the enemy's precise coordinates and fatal weaknesses, and even directly revealing his own absolute Achilles heel. What kind of monster is this? The intelligence officer's legs went weak, and he collapsed into his chair. His face was full of disbelief. Chun Jinshan stared intently at the coordinates of the Mariana Trench on the screen. He turned to look at Lin Jianjun, his voice, unusually, tinged with hoarseness. Old Lin, that location is a blind spot in the routine patrols of the British Pacific Fleet. It's over 10,000 meters deep. Our probes can't cover it either. If something really comes out of there, all of humanity will be defenseless. Lin Jianjun closed his eyes. Countless strategic deductions were colliding frantically in his mind. This was a high-stakes gamble, with the entire Eastern Sea defense line of Dragon Country as the stake. It could even involve the fate of all humanity. 5 seconds later, he suddenly opened his eyes. A resolute and iron-blooded light burst out from those gloomy eyes. Pass down my order. The first destroyer flotilla of the East Sea Fleet will set sail immediately, advancing at full speed towards the target area. Occupy all missile systems, maintain a locked state, but immediately disengage the launch countdown. Connect me to the Supreme Command's red line. Lin Jianjun paused, his gaze fixed on the screen, on the massive figure that was facing away from them, completely exposing its weakness to humanity. It was a monster, but it had made a steel-blooded move that was most in line with the style of Dragon Country soldiers. Prepare high-power deep-sea communication equipment and a helicopter. I want to personally go to the high seas and have a face-to-face talk with this comrade Lin Yi. Countdown, 24 hours. The air in the underground command center of the Eastern Theater seemed to solidify into a substantial block of lead. The numbers on the large screen ticked down relentlessly. Ever since the 100-meter-tall behemoth calling itself Lin Yi inscribed the prophecy on the sea, the entire intelligence network of Dragon Country, the head of the intelligence division clutched 2 files tightly in his hands. He rushed towards the main control console as if the wind was beneath his feet. His voice cracked with extreme emotional agitation. With an unbelievable tremor, "Commander, verification results are in." The intelligence chief slammed the first file heavily on the table in front of Lin Jianjun. 3 minutes ago, the National Earthquake Network sent an urgent confirmation that a crustal tremor had just occurred in the Taklamakan Desert in the northwestern border region. The hypocenter depth and longitude and latitude coordinates are exactly as the target's warning provided. The magnitude measurement accurately hit 3.2. A burst of. The sound of Ino Nishiriyuki predicting earthquakes is a world-class problem, predicting accuracy to decimal points and specific precision. It fundamentally violated existing geological common sense. Lin Jianjun's face was as cold as ice. His muscles twitched almost imperceptibly. He didn't speak. His deep gaze locked onto the second document. The intelligence director swallowed, his voice even lower, yet it exploded in everyone's ears like thunder. This is the second piece. Our highest-level agent overseas used all their trump cards. Forcibly broke into the beautiful country's military's underlying database after cross-comparison. The parameters provided by that giant beast regarding the Nevada secret nuclear test are all correct. From the peak of the explosion yield to the residual ratio of radioactive isotopes, to the geological error correction value of the detonation depth. There were no deviations. Chief, this is equivalent to the other party directly taking the most top-secret underwear of the country on the other side of the ocean and placing it openly in front of us. Silence. A silence so profound that a pin could be heard dropping. If predicting one minor earthquake in a remote area could barely be explained as a 1-in-a-million coincidence, then accurately revealing the core nuclear weapons experiment parameters of a hostile country completely shattered all illusions. That 100-meter giant beast entrenched in the East China Sea exclusive safety zone was not lying. In 30 days, there will really be so-called alien species tearing through the sky and descending upon Blue Star. That will be a cataclysm sufficient to completely erase humanity's millennia of civilization. Lin Jianjun took a deep breath, his broad chest heaving. He slowly closed the document. His gaze swept across the room like a drawn sword. Notify preparations for war. Lin Jianjun's voice was as steady as a mountain, carrying an undeniable resolution. I will personally lead a team to meet him. Chief, this violates safety regulations. The senior staff officer immediately stepped forward, urgently trying to stop him. The other party is an unknown creature of 10,000 tons. The destructive power is immeasurable. You are the commander of the war zone. You absolutely cannot put yourself in danger. There are no ifs. Lin Jianjun coldly interrupted him. If he wanted to act, the East China Sea would have already been a ruin yesterday. Since the other party has shown sincerity, the Dragon Country military has no reason to hide in a basement and negotiate. 1 hour later, over the East China Sea, a heavy armed helicopter tore through the thick clouds, arriving at the designated sea area like a circling steel hawk. The cabin door was half open. Lin Jianjun sat on the edge of the cabin, accompanied by a core negotiation team composed of high-ranking military officials and top psychologists, as well as academician Chen Jinshan, who insisted on coming along, holding only a few heavy testing instruments in his arms. Chief Lin, Mr. Lin, we have verified the information you provided. Now we need you to provide complete intelligence on the alien invasion and at the same time explain your demands. The people in the cabin unconsciously gripped the weapons or instruments in their hands, staring intently at the sea, holding their breath, waiting for the giant beast's reaction. They had imagined countless possibilities. The other party might demand a large area of territory, or demand that humans submit, or propose some anti-human harsh conditions. Under the sea, I listened to what they said. Honestly, I'm starving right now, rushing all the way from the 10,000-meter deep sea to the East China Sea, and painstakingly burning those Chinese characters on the sea. The energy reserves in my body have fallen below the red line. I feel like my stomach is like a burning black hole, urgently needing high-density energy to fill it. I didn't use my body to slap the water surface to send Morse code, but closed my eyes, mobilizing the physics memory of my subconscious, precisely controlling that row of complex hidden gill slits on my neck, using the high-frequency vibration of biological muscle groups, forcefully vibrating Godzilla's original violent roar in the eardrums of everyone at home and abroad. The demand is simple. Feed me first. Inside the cabin, academician Chen Jinshan's hand holding his glasses froze in midair, his mouth slightly open, like a rusty puppet. Even Lin Jianjun, who always remained calm even when Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, couldn't help but twitch his eyes twice. I continued to say, I swam all the way from the center of the Pacific Ocean. The energy in my body is almost exhausted. All the things that can be eaten, I'm not picky. If that really doesn't work, the low radioactive waste materials eliminated from nuclear power plants can also be used. I changed to a slightly more comfortable posture in the sea, but my golden eyes stared at the iron thing in the sky. Give me all the intelligence, guarantee food. I'll help you carry this world-destroying crisis together. There was a 2-second silence. This was a contrast that was absurd to the extreme. A prehistoric behemoth capable of single-handedly challenging an entire aircraft carrier fleet, regarded as a world-destroying threat. The first thing it said was not to destroy the world, but to squat in front of the National Gate and beg for food like a long-distance truck driver who has been hungry for 3 days. It also righteously stated that as long as it was fed, it could work. The atmosphere, which had been tense to the point of breaking, instantly melted like ice and snow under the impact of these 2 sentences, and relaxed. Chen Jinshan was the first to react. This national treasure-level academician in his 70s was excitedly flushed, snatched the spare microphone from Lin Jianjun's hand, leaned half of his body out of the cabin, and shouted loudly. At night, Dragon Country might lack other things, but it definitely has enough nuclear fuel and enriched uranium. Young man, no, Comrade Lin Jianjun. Can your digestive system directly withstand heavy metal radiation? Do you need us to make it into a liquid food, or a solid freeze-dried version? Faced with Chen Jinshan's professional fanaticism, my answer was crisp and neat. Looking at the giant hand on the sea, the atmosphere became solemn and calm again. Energy, Pan. Dragon Country can manage. But before that, I need to confirm whether your power is absolutely controllable. The military cannot allocate national strategic resources to a super bomb that could go berserk at any time. I understood what he meant. Words alone are not enough. Need to verify the goods. Keep an eye on the 10 o'clock direction. My deep sonic wave came again. On the sea surface about 10 kilometers away from them, an old ship that had long been scrapped and used as a target ship for the fleet's live ammunition shooting floated alone. The row of staggered chimney-like exhaust pipes on the back suddenly lit up with a dazzling, ghostly blue light. The light surged upwards rapidly like flowing water, eventually converging in my throat, and the next second, I opened my abyssal mouth, a ghostly blue beam of energy, less than 1 meter in diameter. Like a grim reaper's scythe that could cut through space, it silently cut through the sky without any earth-shattering explosions. 10 kilometers away, the thousands of tons steel target ship, at the moment of being touched by the beam. Starting from the middle of the ship, the beam extinguished, and the sea surface was empty. The target ship did not leave a single piece of wreckage the size of a palm, not a drop of leaking fuel, as if it had never existed. At this time, everyone in the cabin felt horrified and chilled, but the seawater around the target ship did not splash at all. The sea surface was as smooth as a mirror. This is impossible. Chen Jinshan grabbed the cabin door frame tightly. His eyes were about to pop out, and his voice was trembling. How can the release of energy have no aftereffects? It locked all the heat of thousands of degrees and the terrifying impact inside the beam. This control is accurate to the millimeter level. This level of power control means that this behemoth can carry out surgical precision strikes in densely populated city centers. Without harming any surrounding houses, this is no longer the destruction of a beast, but the control of a god. I floated back into the sea, exhaled a puff of hot white air, and looked up at the helicopter. Can we talk about intelligence now? Lin Jianjun was silent for a full 5 seconds, and then, this battle-hardened iron-blooded general slowly raised his right hand, facing the behemoth below. He gave a standard and solemn military salute. Dragon Country accepts your surrender. The negotiation officially began. In the next hour, this life and death meeting across species was rapidly advancing on the waves. I had no concealment. I used low-frequency sound waves to pour out all the information about the Lycong aliens in my mind like pouring beans. The aliens who will arrive in 30 days are not ordinary exploratory life forms, but plunderers who feed on the core of the planet. My voice was heavy and cold. With a trace of sadness for the tragic death of my comrades in the previous life, they held their breath, and the negotiation experts frantically recorded with twitching fingers. Every piece of information was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Don't try to use nuclear weapons for large-scale carpet bombing. I continued, the high temperature generated by nuclear explosions can indeed kill low-level aliens, but the remaining nuclear radiation will become evolutionary nourishment for high-level lord-level aliens. In the previous life, humans abused nuclear weapons at the time of the defense line collapse, giving rise to a large number of cheap lord aliens, leading to the overall collapse of the final defense line. I presented the human defense line collapse of the previous life. Several key nodes, the attack formation of the alien clusters, and several places hidden under the hard fake shells. Fatal physiological weaknesses were shared without reservation. Their energy center, in the gap of the third fake shell below the neck, develop blade shock weapons targeting this location. Or armor-piercing delayed action fuses are your only chance of winning. As I narrated, a desperate doomsday picture unfolded slowly in front of everyone, but at the same time unfolded. There is also a clear path to break the situation full of blood and fire. The fuel alarm on the helicopter began to flash, and the meeting was coming to an end. Lin Jianjun stood upright, looking at me on the sea with firm eyes, and made the final strategic commitment. From today, both parties have officially reached a cooperation. Lin Jianjun's voice was powerful and forceful. Resounding, Dragon Country will use national strategic reserves to provide you with absolute security and an unlimited supply of energy. Academician Chen Jinshan's research team will fully intervene to provide you with top-level evolutionary support. He paused. His tone became extremely solemn. In exchange, you need to cooperate with the country to complete the coastal defense deployment, Dragon Country's 1.4 billion compatriots. This long coastline, from today onwards, is entrusted to you. I nodded slightly in the sea. My gaze penetrated the clouds and looked in the direction of Donghai City, where there are towering TV towers. There are dense residential buildings, and countless ordinary people are working hard for their lives. That is my hometown that I failed to defend in my previous life. Acting foolish, I'll shoulder it if the sky falls. I gave as a behemoth, and also as a promise from a former Dragon Country military worker. That afternoon, with Lin Jianjun's return, the sleeping Oriental Dragon fully awakened. Documents stamped with the highest level of secrecy were sent like flowing water to all parts of the country. The output power of coastal nuclear power plants was forcibly adjusted. Heavy armored transport vehicles, fully loaded with high-purity enriched uranium and special air-cooled canisters, drove mightily out of the underground warehouse under heavy guard, rushing towards the East Sea Safety Zone. The barricade defense plan officially kicked off at this moment. At this time, inside the 300-meter underground strategic defense room of the Dragon Country's highest power center, the air here seemed to solidify into a substance, making it suffocatingly depressing. Around the huge oval conference table sat the supreme commanders of the Dragon Country's Army, Navy, and Air Force, as well as several important figures in charge of the country's economy and energy lifeline. The screens in front of everyone were looping the classified footage of the 100-meter behemoth vaporizing thousands of tons of target ships with a single plasma breath on the East Sea a few hours ago. Lin Jianjun stood at the front of the conference table. This is the complete assessment report. Lin Jianjun propped his hands on the table, his gaze sweeping across the room like a knife. Target codenamed Zero. Possesses a complete human mind, physical cognition that surpasses current humans by hundreds of years, and terrifying force capable of single-handedly taking on a modern aircraft carrier battle group. General Lin, this is absurd. An energy ministry official sitting on the left frowned and pushed up his glasses. To feed a prehistoric monster of unknown origin with national strategic nuclear reserves, and even military supplies transferred from the Great Northwest. Once it absorbs the energy and loses control, turning against us, the entire eastern coast will be completely reduced to a nuclear wasteland. The Dragon Country cannot afford this risk. If we don't feed it, can we afford it? Lin Jianjun interrupted him unceremoniously. He grabbed the red-headed document on the table, which had just been confirmed by the intelligence department at great cost. He slammed it heavily on the table. A magnitude 3.2 earthquake in the Taklamakan Desert in the northwest, accurate without error. The core parameters of the underground nuclear test in Nevada, across the ocean, are accurate to 4 decimal places. This intelligence is top secret that we have spent countless costs, and still couldn't obtain. He threw it to us like trash. Lin Jianjun's voice gradually rose. With the unique iron and blood of a veteran general, he said decisively, he has already given a death countdown. In 27 days. The Mariana Trench will usher in the first wave of alien invasion life. Their outer shells may be immune to 90% of conventional firepower. If the intelligence is true, this will be a one-sided massacre that exterminates humanity. We are not making a venture investment now. We are grabbing at straws on the edge of a cliff. He is willing to be the Dragon Country's gatekeeper, and the only condition is to be fed. This is the Dragon Country's fortune. The conference room fell into a deathly silence. The old man sitting at the head of the table, who had been resting with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes. He didn't look at the documents on the table, but looked deeply at Lin Jianjun. Jianjun, do you guarantee with your uniform that he is controllable? The old man's voice was not loud, but it revealed a force like a stabilizing needle. Lin Jianjun suddenly stood at attention, his feet together, making a crisp sound. He gave a most standard military salute. I guarantee with my head that in his bones flows the blood of a Dragon Country soldier. The old man nodded slightly, his dry but powerful fingers gently tapping the table twice. These 2 taps completely determined the future trajectory of Planet Blue Star. The national machine is fully activated. The old man's tone was calm, but the instructions issued were like thunder from the 9 heavens. From now on, the coastline within a 50-kilometer radius of Donghai City will be designated as Zero Zone. Complete the evacuation and resettlement of residents within 24 hours. Second, authorize the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Military Industry to immediately open the Northwest Strategic Nuclear Arsenal. Allocate the first batch of 300 kilograms of enriched uranium, new model, and the Jiangnan nuclear power plants, newly decommissioned high-level nuclear waste. Third, Academician Chen Jinshan will be the commander. General's rain poured down. Outside the Jiangnan nuclear power plant, police lights flashed. An entire mechanized infantry regiment had surrounded the area completely, with guards stationed every 3 steps and sentries every 5 steps. All guns were loaded. In the sky, several armed helicopters braved the wind and rain. Patrolling back and forth, the beams of searchlights interweaving in the clouds, forming a tight net. Deep in the underground core of the nuclear power plant, several heavy engineering mechs were carefully lifting those nuclear waste canisters emitting high-intensity radiation. Academician Chen Jinshan, wearing heavy anti-radiation clothing, personally stood on the front line to supervise. He held a special tactical tablet in his hand, the screen displaying a bizarrely shaped giant metal capsule diagram. Old Chun, the rare earth alloy air-cooled canisters, have been rushed out of the military factory overnight. The outer layer is 80 centimeters thick and can withstand 1,000 meters of water pressure in the deep sea. A senior engineer wiped the sweat from his forehead and reported, but, can Linye really continuously use this kind of armor? This is titanium alloy. Even a large crusher would break a few teeth. Chun Jinshan stared intently through his anti-radiation mask at those tanks of deadly nuclear waste. His eyes flashed with an almost insane scientific enthusiasm. You don't understand at all. What kind of being we're facing? Old Chen's voice trembled with excitement. During the negotiation this afternoon, I collected some from the helicopter. Water samples from around him. Guess what? After he spewed out 3,000-degree high temperature, equal to purple beam, the radioactive isotope content in the surrounding seawater is actually 0. Chun Jinshan grabbed the engineer's arm. What does this mean? It means his entire stomach, even every cell, is a miniature, absolutely shock-proof fusion reactor. His digestion is definitely not carbonic or oxalic acid, but a super-frequency strong acid that can directly melt metal and extract atomic energy. Wrapping him in titanium alloy, for him, is like us eating candy. The outer layer of glutinous rice paper melts in your mouth, The engineer gasped upon hearing this, his scalp tingling. Hurry! Don't be afraid of wasting materials. Reinforce it to death. There can't be any leaks along the way. We must deliver these grains cleanly. Intact to his feeding bowl. Chun Jinshan waved his arms and shouted. 3 hours later, a train of 60 cars, painted entirely in dark black, a heavy armored military train, like a giant steel python, slowly drove out of the secret platform of the Jiangnan nuclear power plant. The front and rear of the military train each had 2 high-horsepower internal combustion engine locomotives attached. Anti-aircraft missiles and close-in weapon systems were mounted on the roofs. Every 100 meters on both sides of the tracks, there was a soldier fully armed, paying attention to this train loaded with the nation's hope and destructive power. In the remote northwest, several large transport aircraft were tearing through the clouds under the cover of night. Inside the cabin, escorted by the Dragon country's most elite special forces, was a full 300 kilograms of military metal. Land, sea, and air advancing on 3 fronts. Countless resources, countless manpower, were converging on the Donghai Zero base in a frenzy that defied economic principles. This undisguised large-scale military mobilization and material transfer naturally could not escape those foreign spy satellites hanging in Earth's orbit. Across the ocean, the piercing red alarm in the Pentagon's underground strategic command center broke the silence of the night. The duty intelligence officer rushed into the secretary's office, stumbling, and slammed a report with a top-secret red stamp onto Secretary of Defense Williams' desk. Mr. Secretary, Dragon Country has gone mad. The intelligence officer's voice trembled. The Prometheus infrared satellite just captured an extremely rare strategic concentration and large-scale transfer of materials in Dragon Country's interior. They mobilized heavy armored trains and strategic transport aircraft, transporting large quantities of enriched uranium and nuclear waste to the coast of the East Sea. Williams, who was sipping coffee to stay awake, twitched his wrist. The scalding coffee splashed directly onto his expensive, handmade suit. He stood up abruptly, grabbing the satellite image, although it was obscured by thick rain clouds. Thermal imaging and radiation detection still clearly showed several glaring red, high-energy heat sources rapidly converging on Dragon Country's East Seaport. What are they doing? Preparing to detonate the East Sea and bury neighboring countries with them? Williams clenched his teeth, a hint of panic and ruthlessness flashing in his eyes. Or are they secretly building some kind of super-large underwater nuclear weapons platform in the East Sea seabed? Not only that, Mr. Secretary, the intelligence officer swallowed and added. The main force of the Dragon Country's East Sea Fleet has been fully deployed, forming a blockade line hundreds of kilometers long at the edge of international waters 500 nautical miles from the coast. All approaching civilian ships have been forcibly driven away. Their radar systems are in full-power fire control lock. Williams paced back and forth in the office like a raging lion, countless conspiracy theories flashing through his mind. He couldn't imagine that Dragon Country would make such a big move, even at the risk of accidentally firing and triggering World War III just to feed a monster in the sea. In the Anglo-Saxon way of thinking, this kind of uncalculated nuclear material mobilization only meant one thing: war. We can't let them succeed. Whatever secret weapons they're hiding on the seabed in the East Sea must be nipped in the bud. Williams stopped abruptly and slammed his fist on the desk. Immediately connect me to the 7th Fleet Command in the Pacific. Order the 3C Wolf-class nuclear-powered attack submarines patrolling near Guam to submerge immediately. Shut down active sonar and proceed at maximum silent speed into the Dragon Country's East China Sea blockade zone. Tell those submarine captains that I need to know exactly what the Dragon Country people are throwing into the sea. If necessary, authorize them to use special torpedoes for probing attacks. China will absolutely not be allowed to upset the strategic balance of the Pacific. With Williams's order, in the darkness of the deep ocean, several nuclear submarines, prowling like deep-sea ghosts, slowly changed direction. Like sharks smelling blood, they silently approached the East China Sea. At this time, in the East China Sea, maintaining basic metabolism requires massive amounts of energy, not to mention I still have to resist for the upcoming evolution. I closed my eyes. My immense mental power extended outward along the seawater. I could clearly feel the steel warships of the Dragon Country's East China Sea Fleet above me, crisscrossing in the heavy wind and rain. In my previous life, I was just an obscure military-industrial technician, earning a meager salary, burning the midnight oil in the lab until I went bald. In the end, when the apocalypse came, I couldn't even get a decent gun and could only watch helplessly as the aliens tore through the defenses. But now I am a 100-meter-tall behemoth capable of manipulating nuclear energy. More importantly, my keen hearing has already captured the low-frequency vibrations coming from the distant coastline, the kind only emitted when heavy military trains are rolling on the tracks. Tens of thousands of tons of train cars loaded with massive amounts of nuclear fuel are rolling towards me. The country didn't lie to me. For my one sentence about having enough to eat, this incredibly large national machine really moved out all the strategic materials from the bottom of the silver chest. Come on. I slowly straightened my body in the dim trench, already prepared. As long as this batch of energy goes down, I can completely cross the threshold of childhood and usher in the first real gene reshaping. Heavy rain poured down on the East China Seaport. The entire East China Seaport had been completely placed under military control. 3. Top-level red alert lines were set up within a 50-kilometer radius. No civilian ships dared to approach this sea area. Even 3 early warning aircraft circled in the sky, staring intently at every suspicious signal on the radar screen. An unprecedented feeding operation in human history was unfolding on this stormy coastline. The rumbling friction of the rails tore through the roar of the rainy night. A heavy armored military train with 60 cars slowly entered the core area of the port like a black steel python. Soldiers, draped in black waterproof raincoats, stood like iron towers in the wind and rain. Rainwater streamed down his resolute cheeks, but he did not reach out to wipe it away. He just stared intently at the huge, lead-gray metal canisters being unloaded by heavy cranes. Highly radioactive waste, as well as 300 kilograms of military-grade enriched uranium urgently transferred from the Great Northwest. The soldier nodded slightly, his eyes blazing. Has old Chen's side prepared? Academician Chen's monitoring ship has arrived at the edge of the designated sea area. Deep-sea sonar and high-frequency thermal imaging are operating at full power. Good. The soldier waved his hand sharply. His voice resounded in the wind and rain. Hoist and drop into the sea. With the deafening roar of machinery, 12 lead-gray metal canisters, each weighing tens of tons, were slowly lifted by giant cranes, passing over the breakwater, and heavily dropped into the deep water area with churning, muddy waves. Huge splashes of water shot into the sky. The metal canisters, weighing tens of tons, quickly plunged toward the dark depths of the sea under the pull of gravity. At this moment, at the edge of the continental shelf, 300 meters below the surface, it finally came. I slowly stood up from the seabed. My huge body displaced tens of thousands of tons of seawater around me, creating a turbid and violent undercurrent. I raised my head. My thick and powerful hind limbs kicked off the seabed bedrock. I was like a black heavy torpedo, facing those sinking metal canisters, rushing straight up. I stretched out my huge forepaws, covered in black barbs, and accurately snagged a falling lead-gray metal canister in the water. This thing, in the eyes of humans, is an indestructible, top-secret container. But in my hands, it's no different from a hard candy wrapped in sugar paper. Without the slightest hesitation, I directly stuffed the several-meter-long metal canister into my abyssal maw filled with fangs. My upper and lower jaws slammed shut. A crack, a metal-shattering sound that made teeth ache, exploded in the deep sea. The lead-gray outer shell, which could withstand deep-sea high-pressure and conventional artillery bombardment, was instantly crushed into a pile of twisted scrap metal in the face of Godzilla's terrifying bite force. Intense radioactive material, accompanied by bitter seawater, instantly poured into my mouth. This kind of terrifying nuclear radiation, enough to cause a complete cellular collapse in an adult human in a few seconds, turning them into a puddle of blood, was, to me, the sweetest nectar in the world. I devoured it greedily, swallowing the mixture of metal fragments and nuclear fuel into my stomach. Just 3 seconds after swallowing it, the biological nuclear reactor that had been dormant in my body seemed to have been poured with a bucket of high-octane aviation kerosene and was instantly ignited completely. That terrifying heat, indescribable in words, erupted from my stomach and exploded along my thick blood vessels and neural network. Furiously surging through every cell in my body, I let out a deep, smooth, muffled roar. The surrounding seawater, under the vibration of this sonic wave, violently rolled and boiled. I didn't stop at all. Academician Chen Jinshan was staring intently at the multiple data screens in front of him, breathing rapidly like a broken bellows, his hands propped on the console, his knuckles turning a deathly gray due to excessive force. Old Chun, the underwater radiation index is skyrocketing exponentially. A technician stared at the detection instrument, his voice trembling. The value has exceeded the critical point. It's still rising. Good heavens. This sea area is about to become a dead sea. Don't panic. Keep an eye on the thermal imaging and bioelectrical signal feedback. Chun Jinshan roared, his eyes fixed on another screen. The value instantly plummeted like a cliff. 15,000, 5,000, 1,100. Finally, the value abruptly stopped at the normal background radiation level of the ocean. The entire monitoring compartment was deathly silent. Only the heavy breathing of the crowd could be heard. It absorbed it. Chun Jinshan's voice was terribly hoarse, but with an undisguised fervor. Not a single drop leaked out. This behemoth's stomach, or rather its entire internal circulation system, is an absolutely perfect microscopic particle capture net. It has forcibly locked all radioactive isotopes inside its own reactor. Look at the thermal image. Another technician suddenly stood up, pointing to the central screen. On the holographic projection, a blindingly bright white sphere appeared 300 meters below the surface of the sea. The temperature of that sphere was rising at a rate that defied the laws of thermodynamics. The surrounding seawater was instantly heated to boiling, but unable to immediately turn into steam due to the immense water pressure, forming a bizarre high-temperature, high-pressure water sphere. It's evolving. Chun Jinshan took off his glasses and rubbed his bloodshot eyes, a hint of awe in his gaze. This is no longer purely within the realm of biology. Dragon Country has truly raised a god. At this moment, I was undergoing a transformation akin to rebirth. The immense energy provided by 12 cans of highly concentrated nuclear fuel unleashed a cellular-level hurricane within my body. I could clearly feel my original bones being crushed inch by the violent energy, then reforming and growing with greater density. Those originally dark-colored, hard scales began to fall off in large patches, replaced by newly grown, deep ink-colored heavy armor that shimmered with a metallic, cold luster. Pain, soul-tearing pain, but I gritted my teeth and didn't utter a single scream. The memory from my previous life of witnessing my compatriots being torn apart by alien beast tides was like a red-hot iron branding itself fiercely onto my nerves. Compared to the pain of civilization's destruction, this physical evolution and reshaping was nothing. Absorb it all for me, I roared in my heart. It actively severed the feedback of pain, concentrating all of its mental energy on controlling that violent nuclear energy within its body. I guided this energy, scouring the uneven row of dorsal fins on my back. The juvenile skeleton, originally only 50 or 60 meters tall, began to grow wildly under the infusion of ample energy. Muscle fibers became thicker and tougher like stretched steel cables. Every muscle contraction contained terrifying kinetic energy sufficient to destroy skyscrapers. 60 meters, 80 meters, 100 meters, 120 meters. For a full 2 hours, I completed a transformation beneath the sea that could be called miraculous. When I reopened my eyes, those vertical pupils had changed from their original dark gold to a kind of dark red that carried extreme pressure. I slowly straightened my body, the row of brand new dorsal fins on my back, as sharp as the bone plates of a giant dragon, emitted a chilling, ghostly blue-silver light in the dim seabed. I felt the nuclear energy in my body filling to the point of almost overflowing, and I contentedly flicked the tail that had become thicker, with sharp bone spurs even growing at the end. This satisfying meal directly allowed me to skip the juvenile stage. Somewhere in an offshore underground command center in the ocean, the atmosphere had dropped to freezing point. The Pentagon, the Joint Intelligence Agency Monitoring Hall, a piercing red alarm, echoed wildly throughout the hall without warning. On the huge electronic world map, the location of the East China Sea in Dragon Country, lit up with a striking and dazzling coordinate point. Sir, the infrared early warning satellite, Prometheus, has just captured a high-energy reaction. A senior intelligence analyst's hands typed rapidly on the keyboard, forcibly enlarging a set of thermal imaging images onto the main screen. Coordinates: East China Sea, Dragon Country. Depth 300 meters. Core temperature of the heat source has exceeded the conventional monitoring limit. This is definitely not any known type of nuclear submarine. A solemn white old man strode to the screen, frowning deeply. He stared at the heat source constantly expanding in the deep sea, sweat breaking out on his forehead. Underwater volcanic eruption, or a precursor to an earthquake? The general's voice was frighteningly somber. Neither. The analyst swallowed hard. The heat source is showing extremely regular pulsed movements like some kind of giant creature's heartbeat. And the main force of the Dragon Country's East Sea Fleet, 2 hours ago, completely blockaded that sea area and implemented a high level of radio silence. They dumped a large number of high-density ballast containers into the sea. The general's pupils constricted violently. A chilling guess formed in his mind. Dragon Country is conducting some kind of illegal underwater nuclear test in that sea area. Or they are manufacturing some kind of new underwater deep-sea weapon. The general slammed his fist heavily on the console and roared, "Immediately connect to the 7th Fleet Command. Have the nuclear-powered submarine closest to that sea area approach for reconnaissance. I need to know what the hell the Dragon Country people are doing under the East Sea." A few minutes later, in the deep ocean, a Seawolf-class nuclear-powered attack submarine, like a deep-sea ghost, silently shut down its active sonar. Relying on its passive detection system, like a venomous snake, it slowly approached the edge of the East Sea blockade zone. They want to steal Dragon Country's deep-sea secrets, but what they don't know is, in this sea area that has just undergone purification, any tiny mechanical noise is as dazzling as a searchlight in the dark night to my mutated auditory system after purification. I, who had just finished purifying underwater, was preparing to send a signal of advancement completion to the military on the surface. Suddenly, I detected an extremely weak, yet distinctly man-made industrial propeller cavitation noise, creeping along the seawater about 20 nautical miles away from me. In my previous life, I was a nuclear industry technician. I knew the acoustic signature characteristics of various types of nuclear submarines like the back of my hand. This is not the sound of the Dragon Country fleet at all, but a typical Seawolf class from across the ocean, sneaking over to peek while I'm eating. I sneered in my heart. Right now, I've just completed the first stage of purification. My body is overflowing with energy, and I'm just worried about not having a place to vent this violent destructive desire. I didn't ascend, but suddenly flicked my tail. My huge body tore out, a violent white current in the seabed, like a black lightning bolt, sticking to the continental shelf, rushing at full speed towards that quietly approaching nuclear submarine. Above the sea, inside Lin Jianjun's command ship, "Chief, sonar man reporting. Unidentified submarine signal detected 20 nautical miles southeast. Acoustic signature comparison confirmed. It's a foreign Seawolf class." The staff officer reported with a pale face. "The other party is trying to cut into our sonar blind zone and collect data." Lin Jianjun's eyes turned cold. A murderous aura suddenly erupted. He grabbed the communicator. "Immediately order anti-submarine helicopters to take off. Force it to the surface. Conducting espionage activities on the edge of Dragon Country's territorial waters? Do they really think our artillery is for show?" "Wait, Chief!" The sonar man suddenly let out a horrified scream. "The target sea area has a terrifying moving noise underwater. The speed is too fast, exceeding 80 knots. It's Lin Yi. He's rushing towards that nuclear submarine." Lin Jianjun was stunned. Underwater speed of 80 knots? This has completely exceeded the mechanical limits of any human submersible. Deep in the sea, inside the Seawolf-class submarine's sonar compartment, the originally quiet air due to forward movement was instantly torn apart by the piercing red alarm. "Captain, giant unidentified underwater object appearing directly ahead, extremely fast. 80 knots, 90 knots. God, that's a moving underwater mountain." The sonar man looked at the large patch on the screen, almost filling the entire detection sector with red shadows, and screamed desperately. The captain gripped the handrail tightly, his eyes bloodshot. "Full rudder to port. Emergency ascent. Quick. Release all decoy flares." But it was too late. In the searchlight beams outside the submarine, I crashed into their field of vision with overwhelming water pressure. I swung my huge body and braked suddenly in the sea. I didn't directly smash the submarine. After all, that would trigger a diplomatic earthquake. That doesn't fit my original intention of having a strong country backing me. But I must give these uninvited guests an unforgettable lesson. I opened my abyss-like mouth, the muscles in my neck tearing and vibrating violently. I didn't use atomic breath. Instead, I combined the high-pressure air in my lungs with physiological vibrations within an extremely short distance. A messenger with 5 ears was released, bleeding from his orifices, collapsing on the deck and writhing in pain. Although the submarine's hull wasn't breached, its internal control system was completely paralyzed. Like a piece of scrap metal, it drifted helplessly toward the surface. After doing all this, I didn't even glance at the paralyzed submarine, turning and swimming toward the Dragon Country fleet. A few minutes later, accompanied by huge splashes, I surfaced on the East Sea, my massive head covered in starry, deep blue scales. My dorsal fins shimmered in the rainy night with a cold and captivating blue light. Lin Jianjun stood on the deck of the warship, enduring the wind and rain, staring intently at this behemoth less than 100 meters away. He could clearly feel that the giant beast before him was more terrifying and destructive than it had been a few hours before. A familiar distortion rippled through the air. My low, metallic voice resonated again in Lin Jianjun's ears through low-frequency sound waves. The food was delicious. I'm full. My gaze locked onto Lin Jianjun. My voice held an unquestionable coldness and killing intent. The arrival coordinates for the first batch of Sky Hunter alien beasts, by my calculation, are approaching. Point me in the right direction. I'm going to work. This time, deep within the Pentagon's underground strategic conference room, harsh, cold white incandescent light shone on the conference table. A huge holographic projector hung in the center of the ceiling, continuously playing satellite aerial footage. On the turbulent East Sea, a 200-meter-tall, dark black behemoth emerged from the water, its dorsal fins flashing a chilling, blue electric light. A casual flick of its thick tail stirred up a small tsunami on the surface of the sea. That was the image of me 2 days ago when I completed my first controllable evolution. Williams stood in front of the holographic projection, his hands propped on the table. In those blue eyes, sunken deep in their sockets, burned an undisguised fanaticism and excitement. He stared intently at the giant beast in the image, as if looking at a gold mine filled with gold. Gentlemen, open your eyes and take a look. This is not some savior to resist aliens. This is the ultimate biological weapon given to mankind by God. The Dragon Country's national mobilization and the monster's growth rate have severely disrupted the global strategic balance. If we allow them to continue to evolve, in less than a month, our hegemony in the Pacific will be completely shattered. A dozen military leaders and suited politicians on either side of the conference table exchanged glances. A senator frowned and tapped the table impatiently. The Dragon Country has already announced a warning of an alien civilization invasion. We are now going to provoke this giant beast that claims to be able to fight against the alien threat. But if we let the Dragon Country monopolize the genetic source of this giant beast, that would be our real nightmare. Our goal on the surface is to eliminate the monster threat, but in reality, it is to seize his genetic source. To create our own invincible fleet. Williams stood up and snapped his fingers. The image on the holographic screen instantly changed, becoming a massive operational plan covered with top-secret stamps. I have already drafted a perfect capture plan codenamed Project Gold Hunt, and this morning, I persuaded those old fogies in Congress. The corners of Williams' mouth curled into a sinister arc, his eyes fierce. This plan is divided into 3 rings. The first ring, we will deploy 3 Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, plus a joint fleet composed of dozens of destroyers and cruisers, heading straight for the Dragon Country's East Sea. The fleet will be fully equipped with special cryogenic shells, just diverted from a secret laboratory. These cryogenic shells can create absolute zero temperatures of -200 degrees Celsius upon contact with the target, thereby completely freezing the giant beast's ability to move from the front. Hearing about 3 aircraft carriers, several naval officers present breathed heavily. This is since the end of the Cold War, the largest maritime armed force assembled in the Western Pacific. The second ring, Williams sneered, continuing to reveal his trump card. 3 nuclear submarine squadrons have already sneaked into the deep sea surrounding the East Sea. They are not carrying conventional torpedoes, but a special gene-inhibiting virus specifically developed for the giant beast cell structure. As long as the cryogenic shell hits, the submarine squadron will immediately inject the virus. Failing that, even if we fail to capture it alive, the high-yield nuclear warheads carried in the submarines can directly send it and the Dragon Country's coastline to heaven together. As for the third ring, Williams lowered his voice. Like a venomous snake spitting its tongue, I have already mobilized all CIA sleeper agents within the Dragon Country's borders, secretly colluding with those greedy, short-sighted, extreme opposition factions within their country. Once the war starts, these opposition factions will create public opinion panic and sabotage activities in the Dragon Country's rear, working from the inside out. Even if the plan goes wrong in the worst way, we can firmly pin the blame for starting the war on those opposition factions and the monster's loss of control. The entire plan is interlocked, insidious, and ruthless. A naval admiral stood up, his eyes cold. What if the Dragon Country's military forcibly intervenes during the encirclement and capture process? Then fight! Williams slammed his hands on the table, his eyes filled with a desperate madness. Pass down my orders. As long as we can encircle and capture the giant beast, even if a conflict erupts in the East Sea, it is unavoidable. Full-scale attack. A dozen hours later, in the vast and boundless Central Pacific Ocean, 3 massive aircraft carrier strike groups were splitting the deep blue waves at a maximum speed of 30 knots, like 3 giant gray warhammers, heading menacingly straight for the Dragon Country's East Sea. In the sky, dense formations of carrier-based fighter jets were taking off, landing, and forming up. Radar waves were unscrupulously scanning the airspace hundreds of nautical miles around them. They thought they were being seamless, but they fundamentally did not understand what level of existence the evolved Godzilla actually was. At this moment, in an underwater cave 800 meters deep, I was quietly lying on a flat rock bed, resting with my eyes closed. After completing my first controllable evolution, my current height had already exceeded 200 meters. Originally, the dark black spirit armor surface suddenly had an extra layer of indestructible keratin-like material, like medicine stone. My crimson vertical pupils suddenly opened in the dark seabed. This was a mysterious and profound ultrafar perception ability. With the surge in size and the purification of nuclear energy, I can now not only hear faint sound waves from thousands of miles away, but also directly perceive the abnormal physical vibrations carried in the ocean currents. In my perceptual world, the originally gentle water molecules in the Central Pacific are being forcibly pushed aside by millions of tons of steel creations, producing an extremely weak but chaotic and ear-piercing sound wave. Accompanying it is the low-frequency rumble unique to the operation of nuclear reactors deep in the seabed. 3 100,000-ton surface behemoths, and a dozen iron loaches hidden at the bottom of the water. I sneered in the seabed, my thick tail impatiently patting the seabed rock plate. They're too full and have nothing better to do, running here to die. The alien fleet is less than a few days away from descending. These politicians across the ocean aren't seizing the time to build air raid shelters, but instead pointing their guns at me, the meat shield at the very front. This kind of extremely stupid internal friction makes me, who retains human memories, feel a physiological revulsion. I didn't hesitate at all and directly mobilized the abundant biological computer in my body to convert mental power into a special encrypted electromagnetic pulse signal. This is a new ability unlocked after evolution, allowing me to completely bid farewell to relying on my tail, to slap the water and send Morse code in the primitive era. Old Lin, wake up, something's happening. I heard a series of, moved his hand, and the scalding tea almost spilled on his uniform. He quickly put down the teacup, held down the communicator by his ear and walked to an unmanned encryption terminal. Old leader, what's going on? Those bald eagles from across the ocean have flown over. 3 complete aircraft carrier formations. The leader should be a Nimitz class. There are also Los Angeles-class nuclear submarine strike forces underwater, fully armed, heading straight for the East China Sea security zone. My voice was as calm as if I were broadcasting the weather forecast, but the content was enough to trigger World War III. They're carrying a chemical agent that makes me very uncomfortable. I guess they're up to no good. I've synchronized the intelligence for you. Handle it as you see fit. Lin Jianjun's face instantly darkened, like the night sky before a storm. Simply courting death. This battle-hardened, iron-blooded general slapped the alloy table, making a loud bang. The entire command hall instantly fell silent. All the staff stopped what they were doing and turned their heads in terror to look at the commander-in-chief. The alien's damp and moldy butcher knife is already hanging over the necks of all mankind, and the military politicians are still engaging in internal strife and sneak attacks for the sake of immediate interests. Lin Jianjun strode back to the main console and shouted sternly, "Sound the first-level combat alert. Everyone in the East China Sea Fleet, immediately weigh anchor and leave port. Go to Linhai County at full speed to deploy defenses. The Coastal Defense Missile Corps enter the launch countdown state. At the same time, connect to the Supreme Command and issue the strongest diplomatic warning to the beautiful country. Take all the evidence collected by the Intelligence Department about their deliberate provocations and submit it to the United Nations General Assembly as a package. Make a big fuss about it for me." Following Lin Jianjun's military order, the entire Eastern Theater, this massive war machine, emitted a deafening roar in an instant. Just 3 hours later, Linhai County in the East China Sea was overcast, and the sea breeze was mixed with a strong smell of diesel and gunpowder. The main force of the Dragon Country's East China Sea Fleet, destroyers and frigates are lined up like a steel great wall, stretching across the turbulent sea. All the radars are operating at overload. The missile launch bay covers resist the waves. The 2 top maritime armed forces of mankind are facing each other in the sea area, muzzle to muzzle. The distance to a stray bullet is only 0.1 millimeters away. Warning: the front is Dragon Country's Linhai. Please turn around and evacuate immediately, otherwise we will take military means to defend our sovereignty. The high-pitched loudspeakers on the Dragon Country's main destroyer use Chinese and English in turn to broadcast stern warnings. However, the huge fleet opposite seemed to be deaf and did not reduce its speed at all. In the flagship command room of the beautiful country's joint fleet, Williams was holding a glass of red wine. Looking at the dense red dots on the radar screen, his face was full of smugness. Although Dragon Country's response was very fast, it still seemed a bit thin in front of 3 fully armed aircraft carrier strike groups. I guess Dragon Country has submitted a protest to the United Nations, and there have been some dissenting voices in our domestic public opinion. Some opposing voices have emerged in our domestic public opinion. Are we going to continue to move forward? The captain wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and asked for instructions. That's just a noisy vegetable market. As long as we bring back the genetic material of the sister monster, all protests will turn into praise. Williams sneered, drank the red wine in his glass in one gulp. A fierce look flashed in his eyes. Since they dare to block the way, then give them a little color to see. Order the Vanguard ship to fire warning shots at the Dragon Country's outer patrol boats. Let them know who is the overlord of this ocean. After a few seconds of searching, a large-caliber naval gun shell ripped through the air. With an ear-piercing shriek, it accurately smashed into the sea in front of a Dragon Country small patrol boat. Less than 50 meters away, a towering column of water mixed with shrapnel slammed violently onto the deck of the patrol boat, the provocation being taken to the extreme. Report. Enemy ships took the lead in crossing the line and opening fire. Request permission to return fire. Inside the Dragon Country destroyer, behind the cold eyes of the fire control radar, Lin Jianjun in the command hall stared intently at the images sent back from the front line, his chest rising and falling sharply, but he did not immediately issue the order to fire. He was a skilled chess player. He was waiting. He was waiting for that giant beast to be in position. On the Rice Alliance command ship, the Dragon Country fleet did not return fire, and the arrogance on his face grew even stronger. He turned to look at the weapon control console, and swung his arm down sharply. First attack wave prepare. Cryo rounds loaded. Lock onto the heat source on the seabed in the East Sea security zone. He seemed to already see that invincible monster, frozen into a large block of ice, being stepped on by him. But what he didn't know was that, less than 5 nautical miles from his flagship, in the dark seabed, a pair of dark red, huge vertical pupils were coldly watching this ostentatious command ship through the deep seawater. My massive body was like a lurking volcano. In the gaps between the scales on my back, a faint blue nuclear energy glow was being compressed and circulated crazily. The pocket formation was already set up. Now was the time for the hunt. In Lin Hai County on the coast of the East Sea, the wind was like a knife. The raging waves emptied the sky. Dark, oppressive dark clouds, like lead, were pressing down on the sea. The air was filled with the pungent smell of diesel and the salty, fishy smell, as well as a chilling, hair-raising atmosphere of tension. Warning. Please turn around and evacuate immediately, or we will take military means to defend our sovereignty. Loudspeakers broadcast the final ultimatum in both Chinese and English. On the horizon ahead, 3 Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carriers from the beautiful country, like 3 mobile steel fortresses, were searching everywhere for hunting ships. Surrounded by destroyers, they rudely tore through the waves and approached the Dragon Country's exclusive East Sea security zone. Inside the flagship command room of the beautiful country's joint fleet, the atmosphere was fervent and arrogant. Defense Secretary Williams stood in front of the huge tactical bulletproof glass, holding a half-filled glass of deep red wine. A cruel sneer curled up at the corner of his mouth. He looked at the red dots on the radar screen representing the Dragon Country fleet, his eyes full of disdain. A group of cowards who only dare to make threats. In the face of absolute tonnage and firepower, all protests are just the wails of a loser. Williams swirled his glass and turned to look at the weapon control console. He swung his arm down sharply, like a dictator pronouncing a death sentence. First attack wave prepare. Load the special cryo rounds. Target heat source on the seabed in the East Sea security zone. Freeze that beast into an ice sculpture for me. Fire. With his order, the joint fleet's unprecedented vertical launch system opened with a roar. Dozens of missiles, dragging long contrails, soared into the air, like an inverted net of death, crossed the confrontation line and slammed heavily towards the deep sea area where I was located. Boom, boom, boom. The moment the missiles entered the water, they did not produce a earth-shattering explosion, but instead emitted a toothacheing, dull cracking sound. The highly compressed chemical agent inside the special cryo rounds decomposed violently the instant it came into contact with seawater. An absolute low temperature of -200 degrees Celsius spread crazily at a rate that defied the laws of nature. Visibly, the originally turbulent sea surface instantly stopped. White frost spread like a plague. The rolling waves were frozen stiff in mid-air, maintaining a bizarre, rampant posture. In just a dozen seconds, the sea area within a dozen nautical miles turned into a huge, transparent ice floe exuding a bone-chilling aura. Thunderous cheers erupted inside the rice ship command room. Sir, the target area is completely frozen. Thermal imaging shows that the huge heat source underwater is rapidly cooling down. Vital signs are weak. The radar operator's face flushed with excitement. Williams threw his head back and drained the red wine in his glass. He laughed loudly. Well done. I knew it. Carbon-based lifeforms simply cannot withstand this kind of instantaneous absolute zero. Send the order down. Let the lurking nuclear submarines approach immediately and inject the gene-suppressing virus. I want it alive. He seemed to already see himself leading this giant beast back to receive the congressional adoration of the masses. However, his arrogant laughter had not yet subsided. Beneath the deep sea, a silence reigns, covered by 800 meters of heavy ice. I quietly lie prone on the rocky bed, the surrounding seawater completely frozen. Terrifying cold, like countless steel needles, attempts to pierce my scales. For ordinary marine life, this is certainly a fatal blow, but 2 days ago, just devoured 300 kilograms, but that, staying on the surface, after evolution like a key, indestructible keratin perfectly isolates the deadly low temperature. I slowly open my eyes. Dark red pupils light up in the dark ice, like 2 ignited lanterns of death. You really treat me like a monkey in a zoo. A violent force surges from the bottom of my heart. The countdown to the alien invasion is like a sharp blade hanging over the necks of all mankind. I test my abilities day and night, preparing to defend against this group of fools from across the ocean. Return to the command room. The smile on the radar screen instantly froze. He looked at the screen. The red energy, suddenly showing exponential growth, changed his tone. Sir, thermal source reaction reappears. No, it's not recovery, it's soaring. And the new temperature breaks the critical value. Williams lunged toward the console. What did you say? Crack. Smack. Before he finished speaking, a huge crack piercing the sky and the earth appeared in the frozen sea ahead. It suddenly exploded. Tens of thousands of tons of broken ice were lifted up by an overwhelming force, straight into the sky. A dark black behemoth, 200 meters tall, like an ancient demon crawling out of the abyss of hell, stepping on the ice shards, slowly straightened up from the sea. The seawater boiled. The ultra-high temperature around me instantly melted and vaporized those -200-degree ice blocks. Large swathes of white steam surrounded me, setting off that enormous figure, even more terrifying and oppressive. I simply ignored those helicopters and warships. I slightly raised that face covered with hideous scales and thick bone spurs. Since you've delivered yourselves to my doorstep, don't go back. This sentence sentenced the entire joint fleet to death. The row of jagged, keel-shaped dorsal fins on my back did not light up with the usual ghostly blue light, this time starting from the tail a dazzling crimson light that seemed to ignite the void rapidly climbed upward like rampaging magma. Crimson lotus form, atomic breath. This is a brand new killing move I mastered after evolving. By momentarily overclocking the nuclear fusion reactor within my body, I pushed the temperature and destructive power to an outrageous level. Intercept! Intercept him! Williams hysterically screamed in the command room. The arrogance just now had long since vanished. The joint fleets close-in weapon systems and air defense missiles opened fire frantically at the same time. The dense barrage tilted towards me like a metallic rainstorm, but those armor-piercing rounds that could tear through armor only sparked a series of faint sparks on my fortress-like scales, without even leaving a white mark. I opened my abyssal maw. A crimson high-energy plasma beam, more than 5 meters in diameter, erupted with the threat of destroying everything. This crimson beam had no scattering at all. It was like a giant flaming sword wielded by a god, instantly cutting through the air, accurately hitting the leading Nimitz-class aircraft carrier's flight deck. The indestructible special flight deck, in the face of those tens of thousands of degrees of heat, was even more fragile than a layer of window paper. The crimson beam penetrated the deck without any hindrance, pierced through the hangar, and directly blasted into the aircraft carrier's lowest-level ammunition depot. Time seemed to freeze for half a second at this moment. Immediately afterward, a gigantic dark red fireball suddenly expanded on the sea. Thousands of tons of aviation bombs and anti-ship missiles inside the aircraft carrier triggered a tragic chain reaction. The 100,000-ton steel behemoth, in the face of this earth-shattering force, let out a painful wail. The huge hull was forcibly torn apart and broken in the middle. Warplanes loaded with fuel were thrown into the air like toys, and then turned into ashes in the sea of fire. The entire aircraft carrier was broken in two in the towering flames, dragging thick smoke and sinking despairingly into the boiling seabed. The entire scene was deathly silent. Whether it was the fleeing sailors or the Dragon Country fleet waiting in formation in the rear, they were all completely shocked by this scene that could be described as divine punishment. One strike, just one strike, the most powerful naval force on Blue Star, the pinnacle of human industry, was annihilated like this. Submarines, have the submarines fire, kill it with torpedoes. Williams collapsed to the ground, grabbing the communicator and roaring frantically. His voice became sharp and shrill due to extreme fear. 3 Los Angeles-class submarine squadrons, hidden beneath the surface of the sea, had already locked onto it, but under the urging of a death order, they still bit the bullet and opened the torpedo launch valves, firing over a dozen heavy wire-guided torpedoes. Dragging white trails, they came from all directions, bombing towards Zero's blind spot. I snorted coldly, my massive body not pausing for even a moment in the water. My thick tail, like a massive mountain, suddenly swung in a circle underwater, stirring up a violent deep-sea undercurrent. Pong 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 pong. That giant tail was like an indestructible steel whip, accurately sweeping across the torpedo's path of attack. More than a dozen heavy torpedoes didn't even have a chance to get close to my scales before being instantly crushed by the terrifying physical pressure. Muffled underwater explosions rose and fell one after another, setting off towering columns of water. Using the momentum of diving, I directly locked onto the positions of those dozen or so nuclear submarines underwater and fiercely charged into the center of the submarine formation. My 2 giant claws reached out, easily tearing open the hull of a Los Angeles-class submarine. The ear-piercing sound of metal tearing echoed in the sea. I didn't go on a killing spree. The sharp tips of my claws precisely tore open the submarine's reactor compartment, scooping out all the uranium fuel rods, emitting a faint blue light and weapons-grade enriched uranium inside. I opened my giant mouth, treating these highly radioactive nuclear materials that would mean instant death to humans, like spicy little snacks, directly inhaling them into my belly. After continuously emptying the reactors of 5 or 6 nuclear submarines, the energy reserves within my body instantly reached an unprecedented peak. A violent blue current began to jump and flow wildly across the bone plates on my back. I suddenly burst out of the water, a 200-meter-tall deep-sea behemoth standing on the surface of the ocean. I took a deep breath, my chest heaving high. The blue light on my back was pushed to its limit. But I didn't spew out a high-temperature breath, an absolute reduction-to-nothing attack on modern electronics. The instant the electromagnetic waves swept across, all the precision phased-array radars, fire control systems, and communication motherboards on the remaining destroyers and cruisers of the Joint Fleet all burst into dazzling sparks. All the screens instantly went black, and the engines came to an abrupt halt. This modern fleet, armed to the teeth, instantly turned into a pile of garbage and dice floating on the sea. Completely paralyzed, the reversal of the entire battle, from the moment I broke through the ice to the fleet's paralysis, took less than 20 minutes. 2 aircraft carriers were silenced, and dozens of ships were destroyed. The remaining ships completely lost power, swaying desperately in the waves. The remaining sailors looked at the alien beast, the black demon god in the sea of fire, and their psychological defenses completely collapsed, kneeling on the deck one after another. They dropped their weapons and prayed for God's salvation. All units attack. Close the net. On the Dragon Country Fleet command ship, Lin Jianjun slammed a hand on the command table, his eyes like knives. The Dragon Country East Sea Fleet, which had been holding back just moments ago, now charged into the battlefield like a group of arrows unleashed from a bow. Marine soldiers rowed in speedboats, quickly boarding those paralyzed American warships, pointing their guns at the foreheads of those already terrified. Captains. The command ship where Williams was located was tightly sandwiched by 2 large destroyers. The hatch was violently forced open, and several fully armed Dragon Country Special Forces soldiers rushed in, firmly pinning the collapsed Williams to the deck. "You can't arrest me. I am the Secretary of Defense of the United States. You are provoking a world war." Williams was still making his last struggles. The Dragon Country officer leading the team sneered and took out a tactical terminal from his pocket, directly playing an audio clip. Inside, it clearly transmitted the orders Williams gave to attack with cryogenic rounds and to order the submarines to inject the genetic virus. "Mr. Williams, the recording of your vitamin plan, as well as the financial records of your secret collusion with extreme opposition factions within our country. 5 minutes ago, our highest representative simultaneously submitted them to the United Nations General Assembly." The officer at the scene sneered. "Your remaining years will be spent in the highest-level military prison, atoning for your stupidity. The news spread and the world was shaken. Public opinion within the United States exploded instantly. Within just a few hours, the hawkish faction led by Williams collapsed and was arrested and investigated. This aggressive encirclement plan became a complete international joke. At this time, in the depths of the East Sea, after the battle ended, I ignored the mopping up on the surface of the sea and directly sank to the deepest part of the ocean. The large amount of nuclear material I had devoured in one go from the nuclear submarine formation was triggering a earth-shattering transformation within my body. That enormous energy was like a wild horse that had broken free, frantically scouring my cellular structure. I rolled around painfully in the deep sea as patches of black scales peeled off, replaced by an even more deadly heavy armor that faintly gleamed with a dark golden luster. My bones stretched and restructured wildly amidst the sound of tearing and cracking. 200 meters, 300 meters, 400 meters. When everything calmed down, I completed my second controlled evolution. At this moment, my height has already broken through the terrifying 500-meter mark. That devastating sense of oppression even caused the surrounding ocean currents to stagnate. Not only that, I felt the dorsal plates, and a wonderful energy loop was established between the reactor in my body. With a thought, my huge body actually broke free from the gravity of the seabed, relying on the recoil of energy. Short-range recoil flight ability unlocked. Does this mean that I am no longer a cumbersome being that can only move in the sea and on land? I have absolute air combat mobility, but the cost of forcibly devouring and purifying is also heavy. An unprecedented sense of weakness surged in like a tide. My eyelids felt as if they were filled with lead so heavy. The energy in my body was completely consumed due to forcibly remodeling my body. I understand that this is the muscle rebuilding period after purification. In the next 3 days, I will fall into a deep sleep, completely unable to resist. Old Lin. I used my last bit of mental power to send Lin Jianjun the coordinates and a description of the situation. I need to sleep for 3 days. I need to sleep for 3 days. During these 3 days, I have no power to fight back. Entrusting my back to humans is a huge gamble. A dozen seconds later, Lin Jianjun's voice rang out in the communication channel, decisive and revealing an iron-blooded will that could change mountains and rivers. Sleep. The entire Air Force, Navy, and land forces of the theater will press forward. Build 30-kilometer, 50-kilometer, 100-kilometer, 3 layers of absolute defense circles around your sleeping coordinates. Lin Jianjun stood at the bow of the command ship, looking at the turbulent sea. He suddenly drew the pistol from his waist, loaded the bullet, and ordered the entire army. These 3 days, even if the Heavenly King himself comes to the East China Sea, he will have to be shot down. Anyone who dares to touch a single hair of our Dragon Kingdom's sacred beast, the Dragon Kingdom will start a war at all costs. Listening to the instructions from the communication channel, I slowly closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep in the deep sea. At this moment, I truly entrusted my life to this country, and this country is also using the power of the whole nation to protect their deity. The alien civilization is descending in 17 days. The real storm has only just begun. East China Sea. Ling Forbidden Zone. Dark clouds like heavy lead blocks pressed heavily on the sea surface. Not even a trace of wind could penetrate. Countless steel behemoths were parked on the sea surface, connected end to end, like a steel great wall spanning the sky and the earth. It has been a full 68 hours since I fell into a deep sleep. During these 68 hours, not even a single seabird could fly into the sea area. The Eastern Theater Command has spent a fortune, and 3 layers of absolute defense circles have surrounded my sleeping coordinates. Surrounded so tightly that not even water could leak through. The outer layer is a deep-sea denial line composed of submarine formations. The middle layer is guided missile destroyers. Lin Jianjun's chin was covered with a stubble of grayish-blue beard. His originally straight general's uniform also looked a little wrinkled, but he still stood like a steel nail driven into the deck, his whole body exuding a sternness that made people afraid to look directly at him. Old Lin, go and rest for 10 minutes. The chief of staff next to him walked over with a glass of warm water, his voice filled with worry. The seabed vital signs report just sent from Chun Lao's side. Lin Ye's cell reorganization has entered the final stage. It is estimated that he will be completely awake in another 4 hours. I will keep an eye on things here. Lin Jianjun waved his hand. They have all retreated to the base. On the surface, they seem to be behaving themselves. The chief of staff reported. On the surface, Lin Jianjun sneered. A flash of coldness flashed in those hawk-like sharp eyes. Remember, never underestimate the bottom line of those Anglo-Saxons. What they cannot obtain, they would rather destroy than leave it to others. The quieter it is, the more it indicates that there are shady, dirty things are brewing under the water. As soon as Lin Jianjun finished speaking, the ear-splitting red alert of the theater level suddenly exploded shrilly in the bridge. Not the surface radar, nor the deep-sea sonar, but the early warning from outside the atmosphere. Report to the Commander-in-Chief. Emergency hotline from the Supreme Space Command. The communications soldier tore off the headset violently, his voice distorted due to extreme shock. On a tranquil orbit, a discarded weather satellite belonging to the United States suddenly changed its orbit 30 seconds ago, removing its disguised shell, and the main control screen instantly switched. A high-definition optical photo from space was zoomed in, and it wasn't a weather satellite at all, but a scaled-down orbital weapons platform hundreds of meters long. As the disguised shell fell away, the platform's abdomen revealed 3 dark launch bowls, space-based kinetic energy weapons. The Chief of Staff gasped, his face instantly turning pale. The target was locked. Its zero zone, 3 rods of God, have completed deorbiting. Heading towards us at 14 Mach, estimated impact time. 2.5 minutes, the entire bridge instantly fell into a deathly silence. Rods of God, a theoretical weapon that only exists on top-secret blueprints. Two and a half minutes, Lin Jianjun took a deep breath, his brain within 0.1 seconds. Completed countless tactical calculations, Lin is also currently in the most critical period of structural transformation. The underwater probes show that it has not fully hardened even the most basic armor. Once hit by this kind of tungsten rod hybrid, carrying terrifying kinetic energy, the seabed rock layer would be instantly penetrated, and the overwhelming physical shockwave would be enough to put Lin in. The internal organs in a reorganized state, all shattered, cannot dodge. Only can withstand it. Lin Jianjun suddenly straightened up, a roar like a raging lion. Completely shattered the panic inside the bridge, ordered anti-aircraft missile first, second, third array. All safeties released, anti-missile interceptors, fire every last one into the sky, East Sea Fleet, all ships with air defense capabilities, close-in weapon systems fully preheated, barrage elevation adjusted to maximum. As Lin Jianjun's military order was issued, the calm surface of the East China Sea instantly boiled. The vertical launchers of dozens of heavy destroyers opened one after another. The orange-red tail flames illuminated the oppressive night sky. The intense friction with the air caused their surfaces to ignite with dazzling fire, like 3 flaming spears bathed in the blood of gods. With a sense of despairing oppression, heading straight down to the seabed countdown. In the high atmosphere, the fire suddenly burst one after another, Dragon Country's anti-missile system. Reaching peak performance, the dense interceptor missiles under precise radar guidance violently collided with 2 of the tungsten rods, exploding into fragments. Transforming into a magnificent steel firework in the sky, successfully intercepting 2. The radar operator shouted excitedly, but in the next second, his voice was as if strangled. Stopping abruptly like a rooster being choked, the third one, interception, failed. Its trajectory underwent course change micro-adjustments at the end, penetrating the interception net. On the large screen, the last tungsten rod burning with raging flames, in an unstoppable manner, tore through the clouds, carrying a piercing sonic boom, falling straight towards Zone 0, crashing onto the sea surface of the restricted area, with only 30,000 meters and 5 seconds remaining. There isn't even enough time to reload anti-aircraft missiles. In front of the tactical sand table, Lin Jianjun stared intently at the red dot representing that tungsten rod. His teeth grinding, the sleeping Dragon Country mythical beast is beneath the seabed. This kinetic energy must not be allowed to penetrate the seawater, called Destroyer Taihang. Lin Jianjun grabbed the communicator, his voice hoarse, yet revealing a heartbreaking determination. Taihang received, please give instructions, came the affirmative voice from the other end of the communicator. From Captain Li Jianming, immediately hard rudder, full speed ahead. Intercept directly above the Zone 0 sleeping coordinates. Your mission is to use the warship's hull to block that tungsten rod. Lin Jianjun closed his eyes, 2 lines of turbid tears rolled down his stubble-covered cheeks. He was ordering an entire warship, along with the hundreds of officers and soldiers on board, to become a human shield. There was a brief silence on the other end of the communicator, only the sound of waves hitting the ship's hull. A second later, Li Jianming's voice rang out again, without fear, without hesitation. Only the composure and iron will belonging to Dragon Country soldiers, drawing a rough white wake. Accurately positioned horizontally at that fatal coordinate point, in the sky. The dazzling red light had already enveloped the entire sea area. The air was filled with the burnt smell. From the friction of the high-speed falling tungsten rod, on the deck of the Taihang, not a single person ran away. All sailors stood at their posts, looking up at the lance of destruction. Raising his right hand, he gave a solemn salute that shook the heavens and the earth. As if all sound had been lost, the tungsten alloy rod carrying the kinetic energy equivalent of dozens of tons of TNT. Like a meteorite, the sound of fracturing, the sound of kneeling, and the blood-curdling wail. The terrifying kinetic energy, centered on the Taihang, was frantically unleashed toward the surrounding sea. A huge depression with a diameter of over 100 meters formed on the sea surface, forcing tens of thousands of tons of seawater into towering walls of water. The Taihang, a destroyer that had been in service for 10 years, used its own destruction to take this devastating blow head-on. The wreckage, with flames and thick smoke, slowly sank to the seabed. The kinetic energy was reduced by 90%, but the remaining shockwave still followed the seawater, conducting to the seabed 800 meters deep. At this moment I was in a giant black cocoon composed of high-density seawater and dark matter. I had actually regained consciousness when the bluefin missile exploded, but I couldn't move. The violent nuclear energy in my body was carrying out the final circuit laying. I perceived the flow of water, and clearly saw everything that happened on the sea surface. I saw that unbound object carrying the aura of destruction. I saw the destroyer named Taihang, selflessly standing in the way, blocking it from above. I felt the resolve of those Dragon Country soldiers at the last moment of their lives. The shockwave slammed into the black cocoon and fine cracks appeared on the surface of the cocoon. My internal organs, which were not yet fully formed, oozed golden blood under this shock. Painful, but more painful than the physical pain, was the heaviness of being protected by someone's life. A very subtle, cracking sound rang out on the seabed, followed by a second and a third. The black cocoon layer that bound my enormous body. The undercurrent in the seabed suddenly stopped. An indescribable, terrifying gravitational field that could not be explained by science suddenly erupted with me as the origin. The surrounding seawater was forcibly pushed away by this force field, forming an absolutely vacuum spherical space. I opened my eyes. They were no longer the dark red vertical pupils of before, but a deep and extreme dark gold that seemed to contain the stars of the universe. My size had surged from 200 meters to a breathtaking 500 meters. The original rough scales disappeared, replaced by a layer of obsidian-like smooth, deadly heavy bone armor with edges as sharp as knives. The stegosaurus-like dorsal fins on the back became even larger, and at the center of each fin circulated a liquid-like, ghostly blue high-concentration nuclear fusion energy. I opened my mouth slightly. You're courting death. A consciousness wave so cold that it seemed to freeze the soul directly penetrated 800 meters of seawater, broke through the clouds, and even followed the Earth's magnetic field, accurately locked onto a secret underground command post deep in the Atlantic Ocean. On the sea surface, Lin Jianjun's eyes were red, gripping the railing tightly, watching the silent sea where the wreckage of the Taihang was. The surrounding rescue boats were frantically salvaging the sailors who had fallen into the water. "Chief, the seabed. There's a big problem with the gravitational field on the seabed," a survival soldier suddenly screamed, scrambling out of the cabin and pointing at the sea. Lin Jianjun turned his head to look, only to see that the sea where the Taihang was silenced suddenly began to roll back toward the sky on a large scale, as if it had lost gravity. Millions of tons of seawater turned into a giant waterspout connecting the sky and the earth. In this spectacular scene that defied the laws of physics, a massive black phantom that was breathtakingly large slowly rose from the seabed. Without any actions to slap the water surface, without any traces of kinetic energy propulsion, a 500-meter-tall figure hovered in mid-air. My thick tail hung casually in the air, yet it made the surrounding space ripple with visible distortions. Anti-gravity field. Academician Chen Jinshan saw this scene through remote monitoring, and the tablet in his hand fell to the ground with a thud. Tears streamed down his face. Biological anti-gravity. It broke through the conversion barrier between nuclear energy and gravitational waves. This isn't a monster. This is a god. This is the truth. I floated above the sea. My gaze swept over the Dragon Country ships that were salvaging the fallen soldiers, and a trace of tenderness flashed in my eyes. Then, I raised my head, and my dark golden eyes locked onto the sky. Beyond the atmosphere, the orbital platform that launched the Rod of God still floated quietly, waiting for an assessment of the strike's effect. My chest expanded violently. The surrounding air was instantly evacuated, forming a brief vacuum storm. The dorsal fins on my back did not light up one by one, but instead simultaneously erupted with extremely refined reddish-gold light. This was a higher level of energy compression than the burning Godzilla state, a nebula breath. A reddish-gold beam, only the thickness of a bucket but as solid as a substance, suddenly erupted from my mouth. This beam made no sound, but its speed exceeded the limits of human visual perception. It instantly pierced the thick clouds, cut through the atmosphere, and directly entered outer space, striking that massive weapons platform in low Earth orbit. Before the alarm system could even trigger, the reddish-gold beam pierced it directly through the center. There was no explosion. The platform, upon contact with the beam, was instantly broken down into the most basic atomic form by tens of millions of degrees of heat and a terrifying particle stream, completely erased from this universe. Having done all this, I slowly lowered my head. I manipulated the anti-gravity field, steadily landing on the sea surface near the wreckage of the Titan. An unsteady vibration rippled through the air. That metallic voice rang out in Lin Jianjun's ears again. This time, there was no longer fatigue in the voice, only the domineering presence of an army descending upon the world, and absolute coldness. Old Lin, you owe me a meal. I cleared out the aircraft carrier for you. Now I owe the Titan a ride out. I turned around, my colossal body like a black iron tower, facing the endless depths of space. In 14 days, when those bastards in the sky come down, I'll fill this sea with their lives. The deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench. This is a forbidden zone of Earth's physical constants. The water pressure is as high as 1100 atmospheres. Sunlight has never touched this silent abyss in millions of years. Several deep-sea anglerfish with glowing organs are slowly swimming, searching for hydrothermal vents, releasing minuscule organic matter. Without warning, the originally gentle deep-sea currents stopped. Immediately afterward, space itself seemed to become a piece of violently stretched glass, emitting a teeth-grinding tearing sound that could not be explained acoustically. A purplish fissure, hundreds of meters long, tore open in the center of the black seawater out of thin air. The edges of the fissure flickered with strange electric arcs, and the surrounding seawater was instantly pushed away, forming an absolute vacuum zone. A huge crystal, covered in ghostly green-silver light and composed entirely of some unknown crystal, suddenly protruded from the fissure and firmly latched onto the seabed rock. The rock instantly turned to dust under the pressure of this unnatural force. Immediately afterward, a monster 300 meters long, its appearance a combination of a deep-sea giant predator and a heavily armed mecha, slowly squeezed out of the spatial fissure. It had no traditional facial features. Its inverted triangular head was completely covered by a layer of translucent, mottled dark green armor. Beneath the armor, highly concentrated corrosive energy twisted.